Hey guys, so I mentioned in my recent newest tattoo video that I had gotten a new job. I've been there a month and a half now and I really love it. It's a data entry, I enjoy the work, my day goes by fast, my coworkers are cool, my boss is amazing, the culture is wonderful. I'm super happy. The other day, a coworker and I were sharing about some past experiences we had had with former bosses, and I realized I've had some rocky moments and I felt inspired to tell you about them. Welcome to HelloHannahCho's first ever story time. Story time. And speaking of stories, quickly, I love Instagram stories. I don't have a Snapchat. Instagram has been my favorite app for like forever, so now I feel like it's all in one place. I have been posting a ton on there, pics and video and what I'm up to and randomness, so follow me. All right, let me tell you about some of my bad bosses. My very first job, 16 years old, was at a children's toy store. It was family owned, the store manager was great. Actually, pretty much all the managers were great except for one. Now, I was homeschooled all through high school, so because of that, I was able to work weekday shifts. It was pretty cool. I was able to work more hours than other kids my age who could only do after school and weekends. But during the day, weekdays weren't a very busy time, so a lot of the times I got scheduled with just me and one other manager. You know, I can't even tell you when or how exactly it started. He was really friendly, and a lot of the times we'd be the only two in the store. And in a whole shift, there's only so much cleaning and reorganizing and projects you can do. I'd say, yeah, definitely a friendship developed. There'd be times we'd sit around and chat, and then he started to get physical and grabby and holding me and not letting go, and he'd come up and lift my shirt up, and it was really uncomfortable and very inappropriate. It started to feel icky, and as silly as it may sound now, back then I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to call it, but it was sexual harassment. I want to explain the type of teenager and kid that I was and the way I was brought up. I didn't know to question things. I didn't have much of a voice back then, or I didn't know I did. When things didn't feel right or red flags are going off where other people would stop and be like, no, hold on, this isn't okay. I was the type that'd go, everything's fine, ignore everything, you're okay, nothing's wrong, rainbow sunshines, close your eyes, it all goes away. So while this was happening and I knew I didn't like it, I didn't know I didn't like it, I didn't know how to go there. I knew I started dreading going into work. I did tell my best friend at the time what was going on, and she was definitely more sharp and aware. She told me to tell him to stop. So one day I mustered up the courage. It felt like the scariest thing I will ever do in my life. I gently and very softly and politely said, I don't like when you touch me. I don't like when you lift up my shirt. And he laughed in my face and made me feel really stupid for saying anything. He was married, and the next time we worked together, he told me how he went home and told his wife what I said, and they had a good old laugh about it and how silly and ridiculous this girl at work was. So that affirmed in me that I was wrong, and all those bad feelings that I normally stuffed down, I should keep doing that. I did request to work a different schedule, so that helped. And I never told anyone until not too long later. He quit, and I'd been working with the main store manager a lot more. We developed a friendship, and one day it came out. We were talking about the other store manager who quit, and I said I didn't really like him, and then proceeded to say why. She was so mortified and of course shocked, and said I should have said something, and why didn't I say something. The rest of my time at that job was great. Fast forward a couple years to my next long-term job and my last stint in retail. I worked for an arts and crafts company for a good 4 years, I think. My first year to 2 there, I had the boss from hell. Yeah, I started out my career working with a manager who was handsy and then shamed me about it. That was behind me. Now I'm working for a manager who has an anger problem. He was the main store manager, and he was a terror. To be honest, I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did, but then kind of not, because, you know, my go-to was to roll over on things and just put up with whatever. It did get to the point where after so many times of coming home crying, I just applied to work at a different location, so I transferred. It wasn't too long after that he was fired, and I believe for sexual harassment. Luckily, I never went down that road with him. At least he never touched me. I started out as a cashier there, and there was a good handful of times he would yell at me or talk to me like I was stupid, as he did pretty much all of the employees, and I would end up crying. Over the course of my time there, I was promoted to a front-end supervisor and then ended up as the bookkeeper. At some point it switched, and he didn't seem to loathe me as much as others or as much as he used to. When I took the bookkeeping position, I had to work in the office in the back. his office. There were times he'd come into the office just in a rage and sweep everything off the desk. He would kick things, throw things, and I would just be sitting there at my little section of the desk, like counting pennies, wishing I was invisible. His anger wasn't so much pointed at me anymore, which was kind of nice, but I still had to be around it and witness it. I remember one coworker reporting him to corporate, thinking it was anonymous, which it was supposed to be. A couple weeks later, he corners them about how could they report him, how dare they? And that just set a tone and confirmed for us that the big bosses protect bosses. He got a little weird with me towards the end, like bringing me gifts and personal cards and stuff. I wasn't there much longer after that stuff started happening though. Working for him was like working on eggshells. You know the expression, walking on eggshells? If he was in a good mood, which unfortunately he rarely was, then we might all have an okay day. But when he was in a bad mood, which seemed to be his mood of choice, it was really terrible for all of us. I will say there is something to having a common enemy though that really brings people together. Aside from him, we were a really tight group. I think we helped keep each other sane. And those were the worst bosses I've ever had. I've definitely had some better ones and some really good ones throughout the years. I did have one that was really emotional and cried a lot. I wouldn't say she was a bad boss, it just made the atmosphere kind of unprofessional and pretty stressful. But in the end, I've survived. And the moral of this story time is not that there needs to be a moral, but I would like there to be one. Two things, I suppose. We all have bad bosses. You're not alone, my friend. And if you're experiencing anything like what I've experienced, speak up. If current Hannah could go back to past Hannah, I would shake myself. Listen to your inner voice. Listen to if you feel uncomfortable or like something's not right. To this day, I still I most definitely still err on the side of not confronting. It still takes me a little bit before I'll start heeding those red flags, but I would not put up with that kind of stuff again. If you're like me, I understand that it can feel so against who you are and so very foreign to rock the boat. I would much rather personally put up with something crappy in lieu of upsetting someone, opening that can of worms, but there are times that you just have to. Because at some point, protecting yourself and valuing yourself enough should be important. I hope you enjoyed this story time, my first ever story time. I'm not one for let's constantly rehash what's happened in the past, but I do think it's good to reflect sometimes and share stuff you've been through. It can connect us and hopefully I can learn from it and maybe someone else will too. Thanks for watching. Bye.